Excellent. Hi, Jane. Welcome. Thanks, Zane. Good to see you, Zane. Zane's been a regular. I think, Zane, you've come to almost all of these, haven't you?
Yeah, it's great, isn't it?
It's so good. So good to see you again, Leanne.
Good to see you too, Wesley. You're looking very dapper today.
Oh, yes, I have been to a wedding, but I'll wait to tell you a little bit more of my plans, why I've dressed up for this Friday, because I think there's a few reasons to celebrate today as
Fabulous.
we come together. But I think I've seen you more in the last few weeks on these Zooms than I think I've ever had a chance to chat to you before. So it's great to see you all there. Ella, great. Thank you for coming in. Leah, I see you there as well. Patty and Sarah Bell, Siv Parker, Tess Vincent, great to see you. Thanks for coming in. We're just letting everyone kind of come through and come in as we normally do. It's interesting, like when you think, Leanne, just some of the conversation happening now around Northern Territory and just some of the easing of restrictions that are going there. You can have a party in the Northern Territory for 499 people, but you can't have 500. So it's interesting. They're saying, yes, you can have a private household party, but not over 500 people. So, I think that says something about how they party in the Northern Territory.
Northern Territory, yes.
There's so many things here. Oh, okay. There was very specific numbers. I thought, oh, that's okay. That's very good. Dominique, good to see you. Thanks for coming through. Eva, hello, Eva from Perth. Good to have our chat the other day. I've been promising that for weeks, wasn't I? Joanne Dreisens, good to see you.
Yeah. Hi, Joe. Yeah.
Happy here.
And also Jane Holland from Country Arts South Australia is joining us as well. Hi, Jane.
G'day, Jane. Mel George, good to see you there. Michael Hutchings, always good. Michael Hutchings, who's working in the music area in the Australia Council now. Good to see you online. We've got about 21 people online so far.
So generally what's happening here, everyone, is that we're populating the roundtable, and Wesley and I will give that time for people to come on board, and then we'll keep chatting like this for a while, welcoming people, and then we'll get started.
If you want to, you can check out the little chat box, which is down at the bottom of your screen. You can open up the chat box. Some people are already doing that now, throwing in little messages to each other, to the panelists as well. Zane's just gone to make a cup of tea. He wanted to make sure everyone knew that, which is great.
Okay.
Pardon me.
Wesley, I just want to acknowledge that Mulka Carroll from Ernabella is on this roundtable this week, which is really lovely. Hi, Mulka. Lovely to see you. To see you join us from Ernabella all the way up there on the APY lands.
I see Stephanie Parkin, my cousin there from Stradbroke Island. Great to have her on the roundtable this afternoon as well. And some interesting things going on. I think there's generally a sense that we've maybe turned a corner in Australia, touch wood, that we're trying to get through this next little bit and move on to, hopefully moving into a kind of recovery mode too. Maybe it's too early to say. We don't want to be like the NRL, do we? Say, but we want to be confident, but not that confident. Kerry Cashman, great to see you. Thanks for coming on board. Lenora, great to have you here as well. So yeah, lots of changes. Any changes happening down in South Australia that you've been seeing there, Leanne, that you go, oh, yes, it feels like things are lifting, things are more positive?
Look, not at the moment. I think what the big news for us in South Australia is that we've had 5 days of COVID-free. So that's sounding very promising for us. There is still talk, nothing's been lifted at the moment, but I think that we're tracking very well with not having any of those come through. That's
very good news. It was interesting, like Northern Territory, as we were saying, 3 weeks without a new case there. So that's very good. Ellen Van Evens, good to see you. Thank you. You've been here pretty regularly as well, Ellen. It's great to see you here. It's just turned 2 o'clock, just after now. We're about 37 people online at the moment. We might just give people just another minute or two before we set off on our agenda.
Sure.
Just to let a few more people kind of flood in. I know it's interesting. We were talking earlier about just fatigue, screen fatigue. I know that I use screens a lot for my social time too, for winding down and just going, so I've been cranking out the jigsaw puzzle like you wouldn't believe. Getting more jigsaw puzzle here. So, Alec O'Halloran, good to see you. Alinka Tyndale as well. So yeah, there's lots of things. What are you doing to get yourself through it all, Leanne?
Look, I tell you what I am doing is having earlier nights. I'm finding that, really starting to listen to the body. I totally agree. If, I really have gone through a fatigue with being online. And I find that once dinner time happens, try and eat lots of veggies and fruit and drink lots of water, but listen to the body. If you want to go to bed, like, for example, last night, 8:30, my body was ready to go to sleep. I had such a big week, and just being online and working, I had a fabulous night's sleep. Because I find the disruption, Wesley, of being online all the time, because they say, don't they, the experts, the medical experts, don't watch TV, don't be on your phone for at least an hour before you go to sleep. So if we're doing that all day, every day, 5 days a week, sometimes some of us have to work, on the weekends as well. It's, it can very much disrupt that sleep pattern.
We've got about 46 people in the round table so far. I saw Vicky Van Hoot pop in there. Good to see you, Vicky. Have you around? Sarah Bell, Peter Lanoy, good to have you there. Nancy Bamaga, lovely Auntie Nancy Bamaga there.
Auntie, yeah. Hi, Nancy.
Yeah, it's hard. When's that moment where you become auntie? Someone uncled me the other day, and I went, hey, watch out, am I uncle already? And they said, well, you've got that much grey hair, you must be uncle. And I went, oh, you don't want to check my back hair then, do you? But anyway, that's another story. We've got about 47 people in. We just give people maybe another minute or so, and then we'll get going there. But yeah, I think you're right. I've also noticed, like, my skin is really soft and kind of like eating fruit and veggies. I mean, who knew, and removing some of the stress from your life has been really quite a lovely thing. Really lovely. If anyone's out there and you've got some helpful hints that you're doing to help yourself through it, whether it's jigsaw puzzles, whether it's cooking. I know lots of people cooking. I know we had a couple of conversations a week or so ago about hunting and storytelling and connecting with younger people in your household. There's some great stories out there for you to see that there are some positives to this as well. There's kind of cultural transference that's going on.
Patty's sharing through the chat that one of the things that she's doing is spending some time on webinars, but she's also got a new puppy. And my neighbour's got a new puppy out the back, which I realise where my office is out the back here, it whines and cries most of the day. So, but puppies are gorgeous.
Taking phone calls outside with the birds, lots of birds. We had this conversation about birds, didn't we? Prayer time, mindfulness, go for walks, people are saying. I know too that I've been very interested in watching the slow progression of the ibis become more and more white as they get out of the bins and start foraging in parks, and just watching our bird life come alive. It's been not just alive, but become more and more prominent. Nancy Bamaga wants a puppy. So good. She's doing a bit of jogging and walking as well. Well, look, it's 5 past and we've got about 51 people online. We might then get started.
Yeah, let's get started, Wesley.
I'd like to say hello and welcome to everyone all around the country as we come together. I'm Wesley Enoch. I'm the chair of the Australia Council's First Nations Strategy Panel. And with me, co-hosting, is the wonderful Leanne Buckskin, who's the deputy chair of the Australia Council, as well as just one of the most deadliest women ever. Can I just say you're the most deadliest woman ever?
Thank you.
So.
Thank you so much.
Yes, well, you are, and you're just the most amazing person. You're doing incredible things, and just, some amazing things coming through these roundtables. But just to say thank you for coming. This is our 7th First Nations Roundtable in this series, and today we're focusing on advocating the arts, a hearing from artists as we have 3 speakers, which we'll talk about in a little while. And we're talking about dealing with the impact of COVID-19 and what strategies are in place to support the sector. Now, get out there and use these structures that we've got to throw up ideas and help support each other as well. But I might hand over to you, Leanne, to do our Acknowledgement of Country.
Thanks, Wesley. Thank you, Wesley. Look, I just want to acknowledge firstly that I sit on the land of the Kaurna people here in Adelaide, on the Adelaide Plains, and would like to acknowledge elders, both past and present, as well as Kaurna ancestors that surround us on every day. But I'd also like to acknowledge to all of our countrymen and visitors out there, whatever country you're sitting on, I acknowledge First Nations people from all over the country, and from those beautiful elders that surround you on your country, and also the ancestors from where you reside. And I acknowledge them. Thank you.
Just checking, make sure, Gabrielle, you are getting the video. There is a video link there. She's getting a bit of a blank screen. Just have another look. That's all there. Oh, I see, yes. Maylene saying, yes, it did come through. So hopefully, Gabrielle, it came through for you as well. So thank you for that. Just need to next slide, please, Michelle. It's fascinating. Can I just take this time to acknowledge the team at the Australia Council who are in the back room, if you like, in different places, in their different homes, who put all this together week in and week out. It's fantastic to have us all together, and that these ideas of connecting, of sharing, of generating new ideas, of creating and strengthening these networks and navigating our way together is so important. And it's a very important thing that we've come together. And that's what makes this format different, I guess, to the other things that you might be doing in webinars. Just the next slide, thanks. Just the agenda as we see it there. We've got a little housekeeping. We'll talk through some key issues and questions that came out of last week's webinar, which many of you will have been at as well. Some grants updates. We have our guests. We have Sinsa Mansell, Wukun Wanambi, and John Harvey, and we'll talk a little bit about them in a second. But 3 very interesting speakers from different parts of the country and from different practices as well. We'll do a little pulse check, see how you're going, and also what we can do collectively to work together, and talk a little bit about the resources and what's next in the roundtable. Just to say a little bit about our guest speakers there, we've got Sinsa Mansell, who's a co-founder and project manager and choreographer, working in Tasmania at the Pakana Kanapila. I think I've got that right, Sinsa. She'll correct me in a second. Looking at the Tasmanian contemporary statewide dance in particular. We have Wukun Wanambi, who works at the Mulka project in Yirrkala in northeast Arnhem. And we have John Harvey, who's in, I think, God's best country. He's got his surfboard behind him, ready to go surfing at any time in his writing shed in the bush, by the looks of it, who is the creative director of Black Cabs, as producer, writer, and director of that. Looking forward to hearing a few more of those people.
That's brown cabs
as well. Just while we've got it, we've got a little bit of housekeeping here. If you want to, at the bottom of the screen, if you haven't done this already, we have the Q&A box where you can ask questions and we'll try to answer them as soon as we can. And we also have the chat box. If you haven't already found it, you can open up the chat and you can ask questions there, you know, throw some questions to each other or say hello if you see people coming through. And there's also the participants, of which there's now 73 of us in the room. So it's great to have us all there. If there's anything else in terms of closed captions or things that you don't know, you can also ask questions about the format, the structure that we've got here in front of us, if there's anything. But please, can I really implore of you to jump in and ask questions or give ideas. I know many of you are there with your earphones in, earbuds in, and just listening away, but get involved and tell us the things that are working for you, because that's really, really important. And that's how we'll really get through it all together. Might hand over to you, Leanne. We'll talk a little bit about the key issues and things that have come through from last week's webinar.
Thanks, Wesley. Last week we had 3 great panellists. We had Janina Harding, from CIAF in Cairns, the Cairns Indigenous Arts Fair. We also had Jimbla, who works with Karklu Youth Arts in music, and also Nadi Simpson. So Janina sort of highlighted the changes that are happening to the arts fair. As we know, a lot of events have now obviously shut down, so they're now moving towards a digital platform. So she really spoke through some of the ideas that they're looking at in terms of providing, virtual galleries, basically transferring the whole fair over to an online platform. So one of the things that they sort of noted in that was increased opportunities for young people. And I think that's, Wesley, if I can say that, I hear this quite a lot. What's the next generations coming through? How do we support young people through this process to be the next arts and cultural leaders in the future? But also about art making and intergenerational transfer of knowledge between elders. I know, Wesley, that you raised a question during that time around digital sovereignty and how we register virtual galleries. Terry Janke will be doing a roundtable, and I believe that she'll be discussing that as well. Jimbla, for those who don't know, James Alberts, Jimbla is a hip hop artist, and he works a lot around empowering youth and does a lot of workshops. So he discussed his music practice, his feelings about what the whole social media platforms are, how it impacts on mental health. And also he spoke about a vision for social platform with a focus on ethical content, which was really quite interesting, which he's calling Black Empire. On to Nadi Simpson, and Nadi gave some really great insight into her practice and conceptual thinking. She discussed the conflicts that we're all facing, that big picture versus small pictures, country, city, inside, outside, personal and public. She spoke about her beliefs of, and this was a really beautiful statement from her, that small things are beautiful and quiet things are powerful. Sometimes I think what she was saying was that, there is so many different people, there's the introverts, the extroverts, all of that sort of stuff, but no matter who we are, we all contribute and we make that time, particularly, through this, to connect with nature. And so she very much spoke about the importance of being out there and finding those most quiet times to think about your practice as well. So I'll go on to the next slide. I'll leave that there. But if anyone would like to catch up with those last week's, it is available on the website. Also available on the website, the Australia Council website, is a grants update. Again, I think many of you who are doing the roundtables with us every week, there is arrangements around funding, and so if you want to know more about that, you can go to the Australia Council website. If you want to apply for funding, it is absolutely imperative that you talk to grants officers. They're there to help you do the best applications. So get online, go to the inquiries, or call. We've got a really fantastic team there that really want to talk to you about it.
Just while we're moving on there to the next thing, we've just got a question there from Baronga, who's saying that in the yarns they've been having this week, they found a common thread around people really valuing the roundtables, these catch-ups on many levels, but also continuing them perhaps monthly or quarterly once the dust has settled, and thanking us for doing that. This idea of connecting together across the nation maybe being a regular thing. And I know some people have also talked about Nyaka and having a digital format of this kind of regular gathering as Nyaka. And I know that I was talking to Lydia Miller about that. Maybe we'll look at a Nyaka update about what's coming up in the future very
Wesley,
soon.
did you just want to explain what Nyaka is?
Oh yes, the National Indigenous Arts and Cultural Authority. Many people will have been in touch with it in many ways. And the sense of a gathering, if you like, of us taking control of our arts and cultural futures, and very much about an organising body that isn't a government body that helps look after our sovereignty in an arts and cultural environment. Today we've got 80 people online today, which is great, and that many of you out there will have already engaged in the NIACA process, and so this might be something that we can raise as well. Just moving on, I guess, to
the next slide.
Update, which many of you will have already connected with, looking at what the Australia Council can do to help you, looking at changing some of the things that we've got in terms of, payment structures, the purpose of grants, deadlines, reviews, KPIs. So get in there and have a look and see if you need help. There's a lot of response packages there as well to help either change an existing grant, or I know even the Resilience Fund, which is a big thing that we've been talking about. All of this information is online. If we go to the Resilience Fund, I know, Leanne, people have been applying for these.
They have. So the Resilience Fund is made up of 3 areas: Survive, Adapt and Create. The Survive, you can apply up to $2,000 for an individual. Organisations, $5,000. And it's basically to offset or recoup money lost due to cancelled activity. Adapt is for individuals, groups and organisations. Again, $10,000. Organisations can go up to $20,000. Create, sorry, this is very fast and furious, everybody, but it is, like Wesley says, all available there. There is a website there. Create is, again, in response to the disruption. So individuals can apply for 10, organisations up to $20,000. There's no closing dates for these rounds.
Again, all this information is on the website. Check it out. I know you've heard from us a number of times about that. We want to give a little bit more time today to discussion at the end of the webinar as well, so that we've got a bit more of that stuff that's going on. Yes, Alec O'Halloran saying it's a good idea to continue these roundtables. What about the first Friday of every month at 2 o'clock, like today's? So that there may be other kind of structures that we can look at. I think that's a very general feel that it'd be great to stay connected. So let's look at what we can do. Okay, let's go on to our guest speakers then. And we've got 3 amazing speakers coming to talk to us a little bit today about advocating the arts. And really I'm interested in looking at what they're doing and how there are lessons in what they're doing for what you could be looking at your own practice, or the distribution of what you're doing, and what this idea of even digital sovereignty means. I might even pose that question to each person as we go. But our first guest is Sinsa Mansell, and she's a co-founder and manager and a choreographer of the Pakana Kanapila Tasmanian Aboriginal Contemporary Statewide Dances. I think I've got that right for you, Sinsa. Sinsa, if we just go to the next slide so we can see Sinsa's slide there for us, Michelle, thank you. Sinsa, you're everything. I mean, goodness gracious, you're a one-woman show. You're dancing, you're organising the kind of cultural reclamation, you're organising other people's dance work, you're collaborating with all sorts of people. Thank you so much for taking the time and joining us today. Over to you. Oh, have we got Sinsa? Have we lost her? You're just on mute, Sinsa, so you might just need to unmute yourself. There we go. Can you hear us now?
Has that worked?
You're absolutely on work. We can hear you now. Welcome, Sinsa.
Wonderful. Thank you, Wesley. Technology and I are not really friends, and I don't work on building the relationship any further, but thank you for having me, Leanne and Wesley. And I firstly would like just to take a moment to acknowledge also my elders and my ancestors and those yet to come, but also the country on where I am. It's the Muanina and Mumarimina people in Lutruwita, Hobart. I'm just going to speak a little bit about myself. I very briefly, as Wesley just mentioned, I have managed Pakana Kanapila for quite some time, and whilst all of our major projects have been put on hold, especially our festival-based work and our performances, we are looking at other ways to stay connected, not only through the stream, but giving each other small ceremonies to practice each day. For example, sharing what bird came to us today and how it made us feel and what we felt or thought about in that moment. So that's just a prime example of, you know, trying to give each other those ceremonies, even though that we're not creating. I guess I want to talk a little bit about, if that's okay, the time we're all going through the motions. There's been those waves and those motions, and especially for creative people. I love all of the painters, the dear friends of painters. You know, for them it's nothing different. You know, they're still in their same space and their mindset and their area as they would normally be. For me personally, whilst all the major projects have been pushed out, it's been bittersweet because I've had some extraordinary lucky opportunities, and then the good news keeps on coming my way, it seems, as the weeks pass. And I now get to sort of focus on my own work, so creating a development with provocateurs from around the country. We'll be doing a 3-week development on using Zoom and further developing one of my own projects at the moment. So that's been interesting to restructure and look at how you can continue creating in that space and using the technology that we do have. One of the interesting things, I too, like everybody else, is really enjoying this connection that the Australia Council was created by these Friday roundtables. It's inspiring, and you know, we all leave them with a little bit more of a spike. I'm sorry. Next slide. I have put some photos up, but I'm not really speaking to the photos, those that are here. So I am a cultural dancer. I'm also a live performance artist and an independent dancer, as Wesley said, quite a few other things. That's my daughter, Niara Faith. She's also been dancing her entire life. One thing that is really resonating with me at the moment is not only is it a bit of a shake for the world and for us as peoples, but there's so many elements that is not new to us. Not to stereotype, but, you know, the memes that are getting about, you know, all of a sudden losing money and having to struggle, and we've got all these issues and all the families together and all my mob, you know, like, oh, you've been black for 1 week, you know. But there's so many things like that that are coming out and keeping me.
I think we may have just lost Sinsa. Sinsa, we may have just lost your sound there. Just try again.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
There we go. That's me touching my keyboard or something down there. The knowledge that we pass on in these spaces, you know, spending the time with our family, and, you know, we've been forced to now spend time and to create those memories and have that together, and, you know, the memories that it's coming through. We've survived diseases, you know, and pandemics such as these numerous times. And I did appreciate last week's session, there was a comment regarding the restrictions and the restrictions that, you know, you weren't allowed to move, or your passes that you would need to travel around. So it's similar to all going back to, but creating. One thing that's going to happen is that I am, as you can see, anti-technology to a point. And I personally don't want to look at, my work doesn't fit in a digital space. There is presentations and resources that I've been working on that will be distributed in classes, you know, at the university, for example, and other platforms down here. But then I'm limited on what information I can obviously share. So I'm really interested in the digital sovereignty, and it's really important to investigate that and have those conversations. I think I'm looking forward to, and it's changing that for me, going through that process and having to create and finish the work itself has made me have to re-investigate my practice, in particular to that, whatever that task or that project might be. So that's been extremely interesting. So a lot of the work, I just feel extremely lucky that I am still in a position where I am, get to create with the support of Tas Performing Lines down here, where so many others, you know, keep on getting hit, hit after hit after hit. I was meant to put a timer on. I don't think I've put that timer on at all.
You've been talking for about 5 minutes, Sinsa, so you've got plenty of time.
I'm not even talking, I'm just waffling on, guys. To be honest, in my brain all morning, I had a chamomile tea. I think I was going to have a valerian, but I forgot. I'm a very confident person, but for some reason, and here you can see how Sinsa gets when she's nervous, she just waffles. But listen, I think...
I must admit, one of the things I've found too is that my typing has really gone a bit weird. I haven't been able to type, and my words have not been as good because I've just been kind of caught in this little world. And some people are writing through in the Q&A there, Sinsa, about how much this situation has highlighted that you have to have these technological skills all of a sudden, that maybe you didn't have the skills, or you don't have the equipment, or you don't have access to good enough internet to engage in some of these things, that it's really highlighted these discrepancies, if you like, in people's access. That's a big thing too.
It certainly is. And for me, it's a personal thing. It's just a choice. And I seriously mean, I don't think it'll be something I'll move into. One, you know, so many artists are having this stress, stress probably isn't, it's pressure, you know, to be productive and to think that they have to move into this space. And it's unnecessary pressure. And it's an interesting conversations that I've been having recently around what that means for them personally, how it's affecting them mentally, but there has to be a point in a time where they do make the decision. So say for example, yes, I have said a couple of times that I'm not, you know, tech savvy. I do have the equipment. I have a 13-year-old son that's going to be my live-in technician. If I have a problem, that's who I call upon. But the internet is already flooded. It's going to be flooded with work. It's, you know, the content that is just coming out, it's, you know, extraordinary. And to think that you have to, I'm going to go back to a project. It was called Connecting Community Through Culture. Initially it got 6-week funding, and this was on the east coast of Tasmania, and it started off with under 10 participants. But because of the outcomes, the program ended up running for 2 years. And then in the end, we, you know, even without the funding, those participants still gathered and connected for their cup of tea. And the reason why that was, initially, the extraordinary, you know, the deadly co-facilitator, we were just sharing culture. That's what it was. In a small town, it was connecting up 3 other small towns on the east coast here on the island. And some of these people had never been to the lighthouse that was only under an hour and a half away. So initially it was just sharing culture, but connecting community through sharing that culture, and the relationships and the support that was built because of that project is what made it so successful and continue to run for, you know, the remaining of the year. And so coming out of this, while everyone's getting online and really trying to get up, you know, learning their technology and seeking and understanding all the platforms that are out there and investigating, we're going to be yearning for that, once again, that contact work, you know. But I think I'm going to choose not to, you know, really push or create anything in the digital space, because that's just not me. I don't feel comfortable with it. Number one, I'm not capable, but I'm not going to invest the time into making that choice either. So that's, you know, there's going to be a time. I'm very positive. I'm an optimistic person. I'm a major optimist, but I believe that there's going to be a time quite soon for that human connection. Yes. Yeah.
I mean, I love that idea, Sinsa, that people will be yearning for that human connection when they come out of this this lockdown. Do you think that we'll also have a fear of connecting together as well? I mean, will we think, oh, the disease is everywhere in groups and stuff? What's your feeling on that?
Yeah, 100%. I'm concerned about the younger generation and the impact that it'll have on them and how they socially engage, especially those that already were withdrawn or, you know, introverts. But yeah, there's definitely going to be.
And what are you doing in terms of the future? If you were to think about when lockdown is over, what's the thing that you're looking forward to doing and getting on with?
Getting on country. A lot of my work is sharing and, you know, creating ceremonies for spaces and sharing that culture. And whilst that, you know, isn't possible at the moment in these times, I'm still doing little things for myself. So acknowledgement for me, I will take time and think about, you know, that place and that country, and that's medicine for me, and I'm having to do that. But honestly, I'm just keen to get the kids back up onto the East Coast, up my country, where my mum still lives and lots of the family. But so that's what I'm looking forward to, Wesley. But in regards to work and everything that's happened, you know, for me, I like to change the narrative. I think it's really important to change the narrative on this and to ensure that we're looking at it, not only changing our mindset, you know, we're all doing these healthy things and wanting to eat, you know, eating out, looking after our bodies and trying the, you know, the health and well-being and the mental state of mind stuff. But we're looking into the future, and that same thing with the word normal. I have a love-hate relationship. That word should not, you know, normal, there is no getting back to normal. But this should be a wake-up call for everyone to take the opportunity to re-investigate your practice, you know, as a positive. And take the pressure off yourselves in regards to producing work to a degree. And when it comes to the advocating for ourselves, you know, I think after the initial hit, we are all going into that position of, it comes down to what structure you have around you, the community structure, and those that advocate for you and who you advocate for. And that's how it should always be in all aspects of our lives. We know what relationships are like, but it's exactly the same moving forward with our work. So, you know, advocating in a way, prime example, going back to that small communities project, it's going to be the on-ground smaller projects to me, I believe, are going to be the most impactful, rather than we're used to making such big works and it has to be, you know, in this sort of a context. Well, for me personally, I think there's more of an impact and ripple effect rather than that, you know, that sort of scale project or work. And the same with productivity and how we can still continue to create in these times.
That's interesting, Sinsa, this idea of, you know, very person-to-person, community-focused, being smaller projects rather than bigger projects means a lot more kind of connection too between the people involved. There's some conversation coming through in the Q&A around the huge disparity in Australian society, and even more with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, that the expectation that all of us and all families have access to this type of digital platform, and that not everyone is able to access the platform. Therefore, there is a perception that we will be left behind in this as well, that this progress, if you like, is going to go forward and leave numbers of people behind. And what you're advocating for is to really be on country, to be connecting in a very real way through these projects and ceremonies, which I think, a very beautiful thing. And coming through the chat, a lot of this conversation around changing the narrative, giving yourself the ability to be in charge of the narrative as we go, which is fantastic. You filled that time so easily, Sinsa. You got plenty of things to say there.
I just waffled, guys. Thank you for listening.
Don't be like that. But it might be time to move on to our next speaker. And stay with us, Sinsa, because we'll come back to you and we'll have some questions at the end. Leanne, do you want to introduce Wukun for us?
Yes. So Wukun Wanambi is the cultural director of the Mulka project up there in Yirrkala, and we'd like to welcome Wukun to the roundtable, and I'll get Wukun to introduce himself and to go ahead with his talk. Welcome, Wukun.
Hi, my name is Wanambi. I'm the cultural director of Mulka at Animal. So far, so good, even though we are locked down, but we're still maintaining our culture about it, and we teaching and go fishing and all that stuff with our kids and family. I'm still doing my art at home. I'm still communicating with the art gallery mob here in Yirrkala. Any questions?
Deli, Wukun, can you just get a little closer to the microphone? Is that possible? Just, I think you're just a little bit further away than we can hear you clearly then. You're doing some amazing work. Do you want to even take us to the next slide and give us a little look at some of the work that you've been making then?
Yep. No, I think camera. I think these are in camera, and the reason why I put out this because to show people that it's all different. It's the same log, but in a different way of sensing the art. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
Like one right in the back there, it's got a bark in it, and then one in the middle has got white, and then there's no bark, and then the rest of them got some painting in it. And all the bubbles that you can see, if you dive your mind into the water, they are the rocks. And it's like we are in the surface of the water, but when we dive in, we can see a lot of rocks in there. And that's how fish rotate.
Shall we go to the next slide, Wukun?
Yep. Yeah, it's showing you the color of when you're looking in from the beak. See the red and yellow. They are the dot or the bubble, and you can just slightly see when the bubble comes up, and then as an artist, we get a spear and then throw a spear into the fish and get them. And they're mullet.
Nice fish, that one. And this painting here is the same one sitting behind the screen. Shall we go to the next painting? Because the paintings that you've got coming up are just beautiful. Look at this. Mm.
Yeah. I studied from 3D, and it's the first time that I collaborate how to move the fish around. The tree that you're looking at it, the log or lodderkitch, they are the like rock. And then when people walk, fish run away. When people stay still, fish come in. And it's just setting like you and I, when we look for our grandmother and granddad in the computer or internet, to find where they are, their destiny is the same thing. Fish swim river to river, creek to creek, ocean to ocean, looking for their destiny. When they find destiny, they stationary themselves like in a rock and say, this is my home, this is my family. You know, and they're happy.
Wow.
It's not easy to work, to tell the truth. Besides me and Joseph, we work together, how to collaborate the whole thing together so it can move around, so that the fish can really move when you move in.
So what we're seeing here on the ground, is that like digital movement? So as you move around these tree-like sculptures, what we can see on the floor is that movement of the fish that you were just talking about?
Yep,
Okay.
that's right.
Yeah, very beautiful, very beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, when I went in there to open it, you know, kids were playing around and it's so amazing.
And sorry, Wukun, this is at the National Gallery of Australia in Canberra?
South Australia.
Oh, in South Australia? Okay, sorry, I didn't hear that. Yep. Fantastic. Was that a part of the Tarnandi exhibition?
Yep.
Wow, fantastic. Yep.
And I remember going to see this exhibition, you may have as well, Leanne. As you walked, you acted like the rocks, so the fish would move, swim around you and create different patterns and would interact with you as well, which was amazing as you moved through the installation. Wukun, the fish, which was the painting, would move around you and you would influence it along the way. It was gorgeous.
Yeah, I mean, it's the person that we really Mulka hit to open other people's eyes about what does 3D mean and how you can put that 3D into some sort of a movement of the fish or movement of something else what you want to put in. Like for example, if you want to collaborate, my next project is something different, and it's like looking from bottom above. You know how you're a fisherman, you only look from the surface and down, but not really down. And if you're a diver, you dive into it. Right. And now, at the other around, what I'm doing, VI. What I'm doing with the VI is from the bottom and up. You can see the fish, how fish rotate.
Wow. Wow. Shall we go to the next slide?
Yeah, go ahead. Yep. And it's just only one part of what I see a movement in Sydney. You're looking from the side, in the middle side. So you're riding, you know how the water is. There's a shallow, a medium, and really deep. We are in the middle. And you're only looking at half of the fish rotate. And then when you dive into it, right to the bottom of the ground, then you can see it look up in a different way. Now, I'm putting all this in 3 stages, and I hope one day all this VR that what I've done, or what I've done, I'd like them to come back to Enoch or somewhere that people can look at what I've done in a museum, and it's good for hospital somewhere we can put together and people can look at it.
So you're really embracing in technology in the whole VR, 3D, two-dimensional space in telling some aspects of cultural stories. Do you see that as a big future for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander artists to be able to create this type of work that is interactive?
true, I agree. I like to show a different way of art shown to the people in the world that there's some equipment like 3D, and or maybe more than 3D, you can collaborate the whole thing together. And one of my aim that I'm trying to talk to Joseph, if we come back to work again, I'm putting a song line in the country, and you know how people, their paint come into 3 in 1.
Yep.
Say my painting, I sing the song about the fish, then my painting, and then my country, and then put that in that 3D.
Mm-hmm.
Don't tell me why, and how, but it's just one of the things that I'm thinking about it. Because it's better that you can have a countryside of what there are. The country can represent the painting, because they are the identity of that for us as artists.
Mm. Wukun, there's a question here about who you collaborate with, and all of the technology as well as the art. You've obviously got your own community and your own art practice. Do you work with technology partners, or where do you get the skills to do all that?
To tell you the truth, I don't train from university. I train from work. And I've got a colleague here working with me. He is very good and he's professional, and we work together. Since for you, you know how you dance, and you can collaborate that dance into your country with 3D, and that's like a whole new way of movement of what you're doing, and you can show that identity in a different way.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and I think that what we're saying here too. There's so many different ways that the art can be shown, and some people saying in the chat here, Wukun, how amazing it is to look at this immersive experience for art as well. That it's all around you. That it uses all the senses. Denise was just talking about, she went to the Biennale in Sydney, at the Art Gallery of New South Wales, before it closed. And I think it only had like a week or so in Sydney before it had to close, poor thing. But that whole idea that sense of surround with sound as well. There's sound in this installation that we can see.
Yep, that's true. Yep. I even though the one that you showed right now, talk to other people to put their pieces, and I'm telling them what to do, and it's good for them. It's like 5 gigs of all different type of video, and I asked the crew of this place of Mulka Center, and let's put something into it. So I taught them how to do this, and I'm telling them what to do, and just keep pushing my way until we all got the 5 pieces in Sydney. It's opening my mind more bigger and bigger and bigger.
We've been talking about this idea of digital sovereignty as well, as you just pointed out, Wukun, this notion of we have to be in charge of it to do it our way, not just to be told how to do it because other people make us do that, and which might be a really lovely way to bring John Harvey into this conversation as well. Thank you, Wukun, for
Can I have one
conversation?
One more.
Of course.
That doesn't mean that I'm losing my culture by doing that. It's showing the different way of other artists to understand about the art. It's not to say clever, but we're caring and sharing an idea about how to build up this self-esteem of our art. Thank you.
Fantastic. Very wise words.
Very wise. I mean, and I was doing a little segue there to bring John Harvey into this, who's he's working in film and theatre as a writer, as a director, as a producer. And John, you've been working in lots of different formats also, from short film and projection work and in theatre, kind of bringing that storytelling together. We'll give you the next 10 minutes to have a bit of a chat and talk about your work.
Great. So that's pretty amazing. I feel like I just want to sit with those images and swim into those images. They're just so beautiful, and it's really beautiful here in Sinsa's work there as well, and just the strength and the connection. So big thanks firstly for having me today, everyone. You know, I just want to acknowledge I'm on Gubbi Gubbi land up in Queensland, Sunshine Coast. I'm in my little riding shack in the bush. So it's kind of, it's a strange thing to be sitting online with so many people. And just want to say hi to Auntie Nancy there as well, and so many people. Rachel Mazza, I see you there. I need to call you back. I know. It's kind of like, oh my goodness, everyone's in the one room. But you know, I think just picking up on that point, like and Wukun, it was really lovely to hear you talk about working in that digital space and how it can extend your creativity. And I think, you know, what kind of really resonates for me, I guess, and this is a cue to maybe go to my first slide, is voice, and because, you know, like the digital stuff in a way is just, they're tools, you know, they're just simply tools. They're created by people, and we can use them in helping to, or assisting our voice. And I think, you know, like what happens often is when we get, tools can also be a trap for us in our voice, and they can restrict our voice. And particularly if we've got these tools that have come from a Western philosophy and viewpoint of being in the world. And I think, you know, like for storytellers, it's really important that our voice stays centered to that and guides that, and that the tools kind of adapt to that, rather than we as storytellers find ourselves in a position where we're adapting to the tools. And I think that's, you know, that's kind of a challenge for all of us in our work. I did produced the work with Stephen Page from Bangarra Dance Theatre called Spear, which was a feature film. And there's links for the work that I talk about in the resource section, so you can scroll down or find that at the end. And, you know, this was a work, I guess, where collaborating with Stephen about him as a storyteller and a wonderful storyteller telling work within a screen format. And for me, like from a producing kind of point of view and storytelling point of view, you know, the really interesting thing here is Stephen's voice. And so from a filmmaking point of view, you know, all of our discussions were, how do we, like, it wasn't about making Stephen a filmmaker. It wasn't about making him this type of artist. You know, like, it's like he is an artist. He's a storyteller. He's a voice. These mechanics of filmmaking, it's how do we bring that around to support his voice and to support the collaboration with Bangarra Dance Theatre, you know, and working with the designers there, and you know, and so that was really kind of key for us in that creative process. Like for a feature film, we kind of ended up with a scriptment of, we called it a scriptment, and it was, you know, 30 pages long. And, you know, a normal feature film might be a script of 90, 100 odd pages. And so from the outset, we were doing things differently, you know, and you know, like we got knocked back from some state agencies because although they loved the idea, they couldn't fund it, because at that time what they needed was a 90 or 100 page script. And, you know, for me, that was a very Western way of looking at storytelling. You know, we could have turned out a 90, 100 page script by, you know, saying all the movements, but it's not true to the voice and to the work. And so that was kind of a really strong focus for us, and even in the language that we use for the work, because sometimes, like, if say you're not used to a medium, and when I first started working in film, like, there's just whole lots of language that can just get very complicated and overwhelming for storytellers. So, and I think that's a real trap as well. Like, it's about just staying with the story, because that's what you bring as an artist, as a storyteller. You bring that voice, and so stay to that. Don't worry about the other stuff. And like Wukun was referring to, collaborate with people who understand your vision, but importantly can adapt the mechanics of things around your voice, not the other way around, not pushing you through that kind of square peg round hole kind of thing.
Can I just drop one thing that I like to do is, like, you know, when you ever do filming, you must think about, you know how I'm just talking about here right now, this is a Talim away. The film is a Talim away. And you can make her, like, go away, like in somewhere in the white, so you don't see it. So that's what I was thinking about, how, and then from the focus, you can actually hear the song coming out, and then this vision of this woman can come out.
Yeah.
Well, that notion, I think, John, as Wukun was saying, that Michael is asking this question, well, it's saying the idea that the virtual space is a very untapped storytelling spaces about all the senses, and that I love this idea you say about a scriptment, which I imagine is half script, half treatment, if you like. It's a something in flow. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, absolutely, because it's kind of like, really, and that just becomes something that helps to communicate, because it's a very collaborative kind of art form, so there's lots of different people involved. But, you know, it's kind of getting back to what is the function of it, and stepping away from it and going, because, you know, you can get caught up with a script, and you can get caught up in the language and stuff, and you know, and I think that's, you know, and we talk about it a lot in theatre, about Western forms of theatre and how work is presented in a particular way, and you know, trying to expand that and adapt things around for our communities. Actually, could we go to the next slide, please? And so here's a show. This is a show, Hard as a Wasteland, I did at Malthouse a couple of years ago. I think, actually, can we go to the next one? And this is a show, sorry, with Hard as a Wasteland. Like, that's a show that I'm doing with Ilbridgery Theatre, where, you know, we were looking to do some stuff this year with it and next year, but, you know, that's kind of on hold, I guess, you know, in that space. We can't do the work. So that's an interesting thing, and interesting for me to think about what touring might look like. What does it look like for, you know, touring work, whether it's interstate or overseas, and how does that work? And I guess, you know, like, it's very interesting time for companies to think about that. And even that, you know, I was reading an article, or heard an article this morning about, in the US, you know, major venues were looking at, well, what kind of capacity could you have? And, you know, the need to reduce capacity down to maybe 20%, and then increase, this is, my daughter's just come to visit me. I don't want this one. Okay, Bob, I'm just on a call at the moment. Yeah, so those kind of working, you know, like working from home, as we all do. You know, these are all kind of interesting things, I think, for theatre. But just in terms of creating work again, you know, like, I did this work, A Little Piece of Heaven, with two elders from out at Narromine in Western New South Wales. And it was a really kind of profound experience for me, because we worked in a way where we shaped it. So I didn't want a script or them reading off a script. It was their story. So, you know, we had them on stage, and Uncle Dick Carney there. He's like old school, strong, silent type. Like he's a shearer, and you know, he's travelled around all the properties and stuff as a shearer. And you know, I think for me, like, and also the work was giving him voice, and he hadn't spoken about his stories, and we ended up having this show where, you know, we did the show at the RSL in Narromine on a Friday night, and you know, there were like, I think we had about 80 seats out, and then we just kept adding seats because more and more people came, and all of these farmers and stuff who at the time were in pretty bad drought were coming as well, and coming to see the show in the local community. And then I sat there and I was like, oh, it was quite an amazing experience to watch your work being presented in its own community. Often with our work, it kind of gets exported away, and I think even Wukun before talking about bringing work back to the community. And here was this work that was presented in Narromine on a Friday night, and he's just, you know, this elder in this community talking about the treatment that he felt within these communities. And I thought, oh, this is going to be interesting. And I was watching closely because, you know, like there's a lot of pastoralists there, and you know, he's talking about, I think at one time he's talking about how hungry they were and how they had to steal a sheep and have a feed, and everyone laughed, and it was kind of like, I wonder how people will respond. And I was really quite amazed afterwards too, people just saying, I think an old farmer came up and said, you know, I've known him for years, Uncle Dick and Auntie Ruth for years, but I never knew these stories. And they'd heard of things, but he'd never spoken about these stories. And, you know, to me, that was just a powerful thing of voice, and people having voice, and just kind of also the voice of people wanting to have those conversations, you know, outside of the city centres. You know, for me, I suppose this is a thing, you know, like often, you know, I've been in Melbourne, and I love Melbourne. You know, I've been in Melbourne for the last 13 and a half years, and, you know, and it's an amazing kind of vibrant place. And I think, you know, like I'm interested about how we have these conversations in our work that are outside of these places as well, outside of our capital cities, outside of our normal kind of theatre going audiences. You know, like none of these people had been to the theatre before, you know, and I think, you know, those kind of experiences are quite interesting, and it's what they can do for artists within those communities, but also for the communities themselves. So I think, you know, again, it's kind of, you know, I think the process for me is always adapting the process around to what the voice is. I think, you know, in getting to now, I guess, in a digital kind of framework is kind of, you know, how do we collaborate online is the challenge kind of going forward. And just, you know, for me, you know, like I've just found things too by the other week I was doing an edit session, and we did kind of 4-hour days over 5 days, and it was just, I was pretty exhausted by the end of it. But it's just, you know, allowing those times for breaks and standing up and switching the camera off and just having a stretch, and trying to keep the energy, because, you know, like I think as storytellers we work in kind of guiding energy, and you know, we start with and we guide energy, and then we collaborate with energy, and you know, it's such a weird thing with the screen, and how that can change energies, you know. And so, like, how do you keep that spark in the room? How do you keep the grit in the room? How do you keep everyone in the room as well? When you know, they're at home, they've got families, and, you know, everyone's like, we're teaching from home now, and we've become teachers as well, and homeschooling. So it's, you know, they're kind of interesting times, but I think it's a good time to reflect on where we are as artists, where we are as a creative industry. You know, certainly the structures that, you know, this kind of Western capitalist kind of structures that, you know, we're all told about, that, you know, it's for the economy, it's for this and that. You know, I'm amazed, as we all are, just how quickly that fell over. You know, it was so, I didn't know it was so fragile and fickle. And, you know, I think, you know, as a storytellers, it's an interesting time for us to think about our stories within that space. Have I gone over 10 minutes?
Oh, you're almost there, John. But I mean, this fascinating idea of what you do and how you shape your work is interesting. What's the next project you want to talk about?
I've got this. Well, good segue there, Wesley. I'm working on The Return, and I saw Linda Norman Parker. So hi there, Lyndon, who's helped us with this project and who works in the area of repatriation. And this is a project working with Jason Tamaru and Matt Lutton and the team at Malthouse Theatre. And this is a work inspired by Jason Tamaru's work and life, really, working in the area of repatriation. So, you know, we've done a lot of research and consultation around this story, and, you know, it was scheduled to happen in August this year, but that's, you know, we'll see what happens when it happens. But it's been a kind of really wonderful kind of creative process, but a very hard project in many ways with the subject area to sit in. You know, particularly reading some of those old things which are written, you know, from a particular viewpoint by white men who are pretty well-to-do for that period. And you know, for us, this is about acknowledging stories from the community. And you know, really putting our own kind of voice in that. So that's that work. And really, I mean, I'll just quickly flick through some of the work. Maybe if we just quickly flick through. And this is a piece that I did, which was a short film called Out of Range. And I really love working with Aaron Pedersen, and I've collaborated with him on sort of 5 projects or something now. And but this one was about a father and son relationship. You know, this was kind of a response to black men just copying it in the media constantly, and just kind of going, you know, like I wanted to reflect, I guess, another viewpoint of black men. And if we go to the next one, and this one with Deborah Brown here, and it was a short film called Water, but it was, you know, thinking about a future space and us in that future. And I mean, interestingly enough too, actually thinking about the future space is, you know, when you think about those things sometimes and what might happen, you know, it's pretty amazing to think that we're all just living in that space now. You know, like I'm reading about, like, there was a headline about a drone that could take your temperature and watch you. And you know, you think of works like 1984 and, you know, you think of, yeah, okay, people are really kind of on the money with things, you know. It's quite frightening, really, in many ways.
Well, you think in many ways, on the idea that artists have always been imagining the future, and now we're living that future that's been imagined for us. You know, all those kind of dystopian futures of the world where we're in it now. And we've almost forgotten about talking about climate change in this environment. A couple of questions coming through about mental health and the idea too of if people know out there any very specific First Nations suicide prevention resources during this COVID-19, if you've got any of those kind of connections put up there. And also this idea of the Cook 250, the resistance to all of that stuff. I mean, what's your position on that, John, in terms of, have you been doing any work that's been in response to the whole Cook anniversary of his 250th year of anniversary of coming through here?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's been wonderfully silent and been beautiful, and, you know, kind of how it should be, really. I think I ended up kind of doing work around, like, that was just more about our voice. You know, I feel like I haven't done anything specifically about Cook, and, you know, for me, energetically, I've found it good to just sit away from that guy.
Well, it's interesting that, you know, I've got a little joke at the end of this whole notion of where all of that Cook anniversary stuff, which was just the 29th, just a couple of days ago, was when it was all going to take off. Basically, you know, the spirits have said, no, that's not going to happen. We're not going to look at that. You'll all be sent to your rooms. Sinsa, I'm going to bring you into this conversation now too. Sorry, John, I've kind of cut you off a bit there, but this notion of, like John's given us this idea of you tell stories in as many ways as possible, and that in fact connecting to community is one of the most important things you can do. You were talking about that stuff earlier, about doing small scale work in community and not necessarily thinking about it having to tour or go anywhere else. Did you have anything you want to add to that?
Exactly, Wes. And something that I find myself saying regularly is arts and culture created the society as we know today. Not only did we thrive because of it's the oldest language, for me, one of the strongest unspoken languages is, obviously expression through art and culture, but there's business and there's politics and then the rest of the world, and, the creation does come from the arts, as we all know. But that was a few of the comments that you made in the chat in regards to the future and looking at creating the work in smaller, community projects that have that major ripple effect that's positive and long-lasting for generational, depending on the space and work.
And going back to John, this idea of, the last image you've got here of Kutch's carpool karaoke, and that's such a joyful thing, that the idea of lifting people's spirits as well in that experience. What made you want to look at that project?
Yeah, I mean, for exactly that, Wesley, I think it was just a thing about, Fitzroy, which is so important for the Koori community in Victoria and has just been so pivotal for the movement across the country, and, we kind of wanted to do this thing in Fitzroy, which, like place is about people and connection. And, we kind of wanted to make something that was fun, that we could share with the community, and give people something to watch and laugh with, and and I think it's funny too, because it was a fun project to do, because it was just people hanging out and community hanging out, and I think it's often sometimes we shy away from that. When we storytell, sometimes, and me, of course, I we do very serious characters and, oh, this is this and this is this. And, but we leave part of ourselves out, and, I think for me, this was about the bits that would end up on a cutting floor if we were doing a serious, informative documentary, showing those. And that's about connection and community.
Fantastic. And your work, which is so deeply connected to a whole practice as well. I mean, I look at, I have a piece, I have a bark painting of yours, which I look at, and the delicacy in which the work happens. I remember the story of, this is a deep story for you in terms of where it comes from in your family. And what is it like for you to then be sharing it around the world in different ways through this new technology that you've said about how it's a very strengthening thing, but do you feel that you are, it says at some point you're stronger through the sharing of this story through your painting as well in different ways? Did you have anything you want to say about that? Oh, Wukun? No, that's all right. You're just on mute there, my friend. You just need to unmute your, there we go.
I feel more strongly about how you use your own indigenous colour from the ground, red, yellow, black, and you put that into your art, and it shows better than, I'm not saying the cleric that we buy from the shop is not bad, but to me, it's washed away. When you buy, you don't buy anything from the shop, and this is what I do, is get a natural color, and then you paint it, and just only use an orchid to make it more shiny and all that stuff.
And it comes from your country. I mean, I love,
yeah,
literally
natural,
coming from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The more you use the natural stuff or pieces from the ground, the better and the stronger it gets.
Yeah.
I'm just a person how I think, because I mean a lot of artists want to use paint and brushes and you buy it a lot from the shop. You know, the more you buy it, the more you spend money on it. Then what we do, we just grab it and we just that's how I do it.
Indeed. I think we might come back to a couple more conversation pieces so we can see each other's faces in a while too. Or we might go through, with your permission, we might just jump into the pulse check, just see how everyone's going. I know some people out there are feeling the mental health strains a lot and are very worried about the vulnerable young people in our community. And a couple of things coming through the Q&A about, as I was saying before, First Nations specific suicide prevention resources. If anyone has any connections, at the end of this, we do have some of those resources that we have connections to. But if anyone has any insight around the country about how there might be First Nation specific suicide prevention resources, please bring them on. And this whole idea of the mental health of our community being very important and how we get through this. And if you want to take some time, there's still about just under 80 of us online. Just take the time to put into the chat a little bit about how you're feeling at this point in time. Leanne, how are you feeling? What's going on for you?
Oh, look, how am I feeling? I feel trying to hold energy. How to, I think, John, you spoke about that, is how you retain energy by being in front of a screen. And, I mean, I'm a person who, I get a lot of energy and by bouncing off others. I love to collaborate with others, and that's how I fuel my creativity or my sense of thinking and well-being. And so I think, just being mindful of that all the time, that it's okay if you're feeling, a little bit tired all the time, or, you wake up, you feel tired, or anything like that. It's a very different style of day-to-day, isn't it?
Yeah.
That we're living in.
I agree. And that idea of trying to find the rhythms for yourself, which are about your body. We said earlier about listening to your body, finding that. June saying here that these webinars give a sense of inspiration for recovery and how ideas are bouncing around. Erin also talking about us young people from all over the country are catching up every couple of days for a group Zoom or FaceTimes, and we're sharing ideas and staying positive. That thing that Sinsa was saying too about changing the narrative. Like, I know it's almost like a terrible kind of competition almost around the world of how many cases are where and how many people are dying at the moment, but how do we change that as well? Tess is saying that there's a wellbeing and suicide prevention app for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander youth created by the Black Dog Institute. That's great to put out there as well. And there's a connection there that Gabrielle's put up for Thinking Youth Train the Presenter workshop. So there's some Deadly Thinking Youth Train the Presenter workshop to get involved with as well. We might just pop to the next slide. Feel free to keep putting some ideas in there and some connections along the way, folks. And what are we doing to collectively work together? There's a lot of stuff that we need to look at. And if there's anything out there that you want to share, or if you have even suggestions, some people have been getting in contact with me saying, let's talk a little bit more about this digital sovereignty. And I know that we've got Terry Janke coming in a little while soon. The idea, Gabrielle saying it's an online Indigenous youth support program that she was putting up there before. But also the idea of fee structures. What do you pay people to do things online? What does it cost? Where does it come from? And also maybe a little update on NIACA, the National Indigenous Arts and Culture Authority, please excuse me. That the idea of getting an update of how that's going, because that will have slowed down a bit during all of the COVID-19. And also Nancy Bamaga, Auntie Nancy saying, routines are also important to stick to and learning online classes. So maybe giving yourself a couple of tasks to do. I've downloaded a yoga app. That's one step. Doing it is another thing altogether. I've just downloaded it, so at least I've got one thing to do. We're going there. Maylene saying, I remember that we're in the system and I feel closer to my family and mob. Self-care and back to basics. Sleep. Got to catch up. More fire time. Less noise. Oh, is that... Yeah, fire time. Oh, go sit by the fire. That makes sense to me. Technology and television, less of all of that stuff. And strictly sacred zone, you know? Like right now, here's a sacred zone. Get all that there. And I think John even showed us too. Get your family involved. Get your daughter to come in. She can talk to you anytime. There's no reason why your daughter can't talk to you there, John. You know that. She'll make that clear to you anyway, I imagine.
Yeah, she knows that. So.
We know who's in charge. We know who's in charge. Lots of great things there. Lots of great initiatives. Some people saying, where can we see John Harvey's work? We might just pop to the next slide, which tells us some resources that the Australia Council has for us. You can look at the Australia Council website where we have all of these things here. And also some of the programs, the Resilience Fund, which we talked about earlier, and some COVID-19 information and a couple of Facebook groups. But we might just then pop to the next slide, because there we have a number of links. And again, this will all be on the Australia Council website there, Patty. She's asking the question, where do I get to see John Harvey's work? So, you know, you can pop in there and see a number of the examples of what he was talking about and what's going on there. Lots of people saying here to, let's bring the family into the workspace when things get back to normal, whatever normal is. You know, and that whole idea of bringing it all together so that it's not seen as separate. I know I love to work in a space where there's dogs and children, because if you have dogs and children in a space, you know it's always safe and family focused. And
absolutely.
That's, you know, bring your dog to work. Let's have more dogs.
Or your cat.
Or your cat. Oh, I don't know. I won't go that far. I don't know about cats. I'm a bit kind of full on that way. I don't know. You know, I've been in Utica. There's dogs there, always ready to play and be part of a community.
Yeah. Well, dogs are family for us.
Yeah, indeed. And especially people talking about that fire time, that in these cooler months, as it kind of kicks in, that getting out around a fire is always good for your soul as well. The next slide there, talking about Beyond Blue and some of the connections there, and some resources in Indigenous languages. Those people who are asking about some mental health support structures there, things that are helping Indigenous communities, again, all on the website. And the next roundtable is with Rachel Mazza, the lovely Eva Grace from Yiriyarkan Theatre, and Brenda Donnelly. They're all equally lovely. I shouldn't just pick on one to say they're lovely, but they're all lovely to do all that stuff. And I've just rushed through all of that, folks, so that we could get back, we could put the this PowerPoint aside and we can see the faces of the people we've been talking to. And so there's the lovely Leanne Buckskin, and I'm there. And I just want to say thank you so much to all of our speakers. But John Harvey, if you want to talk to us a little bit just about what do you understand digital sovereignty to mean? You just have to unmute yourself there, John.
Well, I mean, I think digital sovereignty is about voice. At least for me, it's being able to, you know, sovereignty is having your voice and being able to express your voice in the way that you want, and that's based on your worldview, on your philosophy, on your culture, on your people. And to me, that's what digital kind of sovereignty is. And you know, Sarah has a different view of digital sovereignty than me. I think, you know, just quickly on that for artists, and I guess, you know, if you're a playwright or whatever, like, you know, a lot of people are talking about putting plays out digitally, and that's something that as artists, you know, you just need to think about. Like Wesley, I think, mentioned earlier about how much do you charge. Like, other things to think about is where is that available? Is it just Australia? Is it geotagged for Australia? Is it worldwide? You know, how long is it going to be on there for? Is it there for a very long time? If you have a work that you're thinking of touring, what does that mean for the work once it's shared, you know? So I think there's, you know, those are things to think about in sovereignty as well. Wesley, you're
on mute. Get off it, Wesley. Get onto it. Sinsa, you've talked about sovereignty as well in a very different way, about saying that technology may not be your way forward. But what do you say to those who go, well, how else do I know about Sinsa's work if I live on the other side of the country? You know, technology provides all that stuff. Do you think that there's a way of sharing information and knowledge that's still strongly based in your culture and country?
I do. It's highly important. I do understand how important it is, and that's just my personal preference. I'm used to living in a very small town. I'm not one for cities, let alone. And I suppose, how are people going to know about my work on the other side of the world? It's going to be that advocating, isn't it? And the championing of the work itself. I suppose I don't have a website, you know, those sort of things. But in saying that, you know, I have a large project that we're working on. Thomas E.S. Kelly and I actually got to spend the first week in this madness before the lockdown, and we had artists here on the island. They flew out 2 days before the border, you know, everything was shut down. And a huge component of that is AV. So we are moving into a way of sharing our cultural stories and a ceremony and impact, not you know, that interactive space. So as Wukun was working with his artwork, and so we're looking at creating and the performance, and it's, you know, it's only had that one development, unfortunately, that was cut short, but it's moving forward, and it is important to use the tools, as you say, John, that are there. That's just my personal preference to a bit old school. I'd rather have the clapsticks and the ochre and slather that all over the dance floor and, you know, use my voice to speak rather than this screen, you know, and the tools that are there, even though there's many.
And as you say, those collaborations then, Sinsa, how you work with different people. Wukun, we were just talking then about how, you know, the ochres, the things connected to country are very important, but you found ways to get that voice out and about. And the digital technologies that you're engaging with are really quite interesting and thoughtful. What's the next step for you? Where do you go next in terms of totally immersive VR? I mean, what's going on? It seems like the future's open to you.
I'm not sure really, because I've got to try and get the landscape and paint it together, because then you can dance in that and show the painting. So try and collaborate those all in one area, because that's one of the things that it's not showing in the art is the landscape, because it's all separately you're showing it, but not particular as a collaborating whole thing together. Say for example, if I'm doing a particular crocodile image of that, then I gotta try and make a country and the country where that crocodile come from, and the painting and the people can dance on that land, and then that describe one whole a poem about the whole thing, about the art, that what you do. I'm trying to figure it out, the way to get into that 3D. I'm trying to learn as well doing it.
Well, I think we've had all three speakers have talked about their different ways of dealing with this, Leanne. And I just want to say, a couple of people talking about, you know, this anniversary we had just recently, the 250th anniversary of Cook coming in. And I'd just like to say I've dressed up. I've put my thing on. I've got a drink to say, and a little celebratory cheese platter here to say we have survived 250 years since Cook came, everyone. And we just want to say, how deadly are we? Because where's Cook now? Nowhere. Cook's nowhere. We're here. And all his big celebration of 250 years, well, I drink to hear, where is he? Not even. He's gone. But I just want to say,
cheers.
Cheers to our celebration of our survival, and you know, and how we're connected. And I'm going to have my little celebratory cheese platter, and I'm going to have my little water with some lemon in it to say we've got there. And I've worn my little corsage to dress up just for you.
Now, Wesley, can I ask why you're wearing the corsage?
I went to a wedding today, not my own, but I went to a wedding, and it was one of those wonderful things that this couple wanted to get married, and they had to cancel everything to do it, but they found their way into a registry office, and there was just the five of us, the celebrant, the couple, and the two witnesses. And even my friend's, her little 9-year-old boy had to stay outside and film through the open door. And it's wonderful. People are finding their own way through. And can I just say, as we're kind of coming to a close, thank you so much to John and Sinsa and Wukun for their wonderful talks today. Leanne, so good to see you as always. See that you're safe, that you're healthy, that you're socially distanced, and kind of, we've got a solidarity. We're virtually together, and then we've got some sense of kind of really working forward. I just want to end, if just before you end there, Leanne, just to say, Michael's just saying this thing too, that healing on country is so important. Yes, we can be in our homes, but to go out and take Sinsa's point about healing on country and being with family is so important. So thank you to everyone. Leanne, if you give us the last words and we'll wrap it up.
Thank you, Wesley. Look, I just want to also take the moment to thank Sinsa, Wukun and John. You're all very inspirational practitioners, and I really do value the work that you do and your creativity and the way in which you bring culture out to the forefront. And I very much look forward to what you present us in the future. But I'd also like to take a moment to thank you, Wesley, and thank you for such fabulous hosting. We have more roundtables to go, but also the great team that sits behind the Australia Council who supports us to get this up and happening. Thank you to everyone who's there in the background as well.
Marvellous. Well, a happy celebration of your 250th sense of authority and cultural custodianship and our sovereignty, and we'll see you next week for Rachel, Eva and Mirinda at the next roundtable. See it all online. Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, everyone.